That's from the Latin. I didn't know that.
That's kiss your assets goodbye. I do. Hello, maestro.
How are you, sir?
Good, sir.
Well, it's nice to see doing that real...
For 3 decades, Johnny Carson's Tonight Show wasn't just television. It was America's nightly ritual. It was the place where comedians found their big break, where movie stars sold their newest projects, and where millions of viewers tuned in not just for laughs, but for a sense of familiarity. Sitting across from Carson was a rite of passage in Hollywood. That couch could turn an unknown performer into a household name overnight. But the power of that stage cut both ways. A single bad appearance, a clash of personalities, or even one off-color comment could seal a guest's fate forever. Because while Carson appeared warm, genial, and unshakably smooth to audiences at home, behind the scenes he had strict rules, unspoken boundaries, and a razor-sharp memory. If you disappointed Johnny, chances were you weren't getting a second chance. Over the years, some guests found that out the hard way. They walked onto the stage expecting to charm America, but instead ended up banished from the Tonight Show guest list. Their mistakes were varied: provocation, arrogance, intoxication, disrespect, but all had one thing in common. They crossed Johnny Carson. One of the most infamous cases came from a character named Tony Clifton, the belligerent lounge singer persona created by comedian Andy Kaufman. Producers thought they were booking an eccentric act in 1979, but what they got was chaos itself. From the moment Clifton arrived at the studio, pretending to be drunk and blowing cigar smoke in people's faces, the tension was thick. Carson tried to talk to him backstage, hoping to at least set some boundaries, but Clifton brushed him off completely. The moment the performance began, it unraveled fast. Clifton sang off-key, stopped mid-song to insult an audience member, and even threw water at the Tonight Show's bandleader, Doc Severinsen. Carson, normally unflappable, lost his patience. The show cut to commercial, and during the break, Clifton was literally dragged out of the building by security, still screaming about his importance. When Carson returned on air, Clifton was gone, and he was never invited back again. Kaufman himself wasn't blacklisted. Carson respected him as a performer. But the character of Tony Clifton had violated the Tonight Show's most important rule. Johnny was always in control. Years later, another larger-than-life figure tested Carson's patience in a different way. By 1987, Madonna was the biggest pop star in the world, known for her provocative performances and refusal to play by anyone's rules. Producers expected sparks when she came on The Tonight Show, but what they got was a painfully awkward interview. From the start, Madonna acted as if Carson should feel honored she showed up. She kept him waiting backstage, something Johnny hated. And when the cameras rolled, she gave short, dismissive answers. Carson tried to engage her, but she seemed uninterested, even condescending. The breaking point came when she suggested Carson couldn't possibly understand her level of fame, a statement that visibly tightened his smile. This was a man who had interviewed the Beatles, Sinatra, and presidents. To him, it was beyond arrogance. He finished the interview like a professional, but afterward told his team she wasn't to be invited back during his tenure. Madonna wasn't officially banned, but Carson's unspoken blacklist was just as permanent. Not every clash was about arrogance. Sometimes it was about anger. In 1981, actor Robert Blake, once a child star and later the lead in the TV show Beretta, came on to promote a new film. Instead of chatting about the project, he launched into a tirade against Hollywood, the studio system, and even Carson himself. He interrupted Johnny's jokes, insisted he wasn't there to entertain, and gave grim, graphic descriptions of his childhood experiences in the industry. The audience grew uncomfortable, and Carson's famous smile stiffened. He finished the segment calmly, but as soon as the cameras were off, Blake was crossed off the guest list. For an actor trying to transition into a new phase of his career, being cut off from The Tonight Show was a serious blow, and he never returned. Sometimes the issue wasn't hostility, but excess. In 1975, celebrated author Truman Capote arrived for his Tonight Show appearance so visibly intoxicated that the production staff debated pulling the segment entirely. Carson, ever the optimist, tried to guide him through, even completing Capote's thoughts when he trailed off. But when Capote began slurring gossip and making unverified accusations about other celebrities live on air, Carson shut it down. The interview was cut short, something Carson almost never did with big names, and afterward, Capote was quietly placed on an indefinite pause. He was never labeled banned, but he wasn't invited back again either. His battle with addiction only worsened, and by the time he passed in 1984, he had never returned to Carson's couch. Even Carson's closest friends could overstep. Don Rickles, the master of insult comedy, was a Tonight Show regular whose on-air roasting of Carson was part of the fun. But there were certain boundaries. Carson's private life was off-limits. One night, Rickles crossed that line with a pointed joke about Carson's divorce and alimony payments. The audience laughed, but those who knew Johnny saw it immediately. The genuine smile disappeared, replaced by a flash of anger. Carson never exploded on air, but afterward he told producers to put Rickles on ice for a while. For nearly a year, Rickles wasn't invited back. Eventually, he worked his way back into Carson's good graces with a public, tongue-in-cheek plea at a Dean Martin roast. Carson laughed. The friendship resumed, but Rickles never joked about Johnny's personal life again. Then there was Chevy Chase, who briefly guest-hosted while Carson was on vacation in 1977. Chase, fresh off his Saturday Night Live success, saw himself as the next king of late night. The problem was, he acted like it. He dismissed advice from Carson's longtime staff, called the format outdated, and brought a condescending attitude to rehearsals. On air, he relied on slapstick antics that disrupted the flow of the show, and his treatment of the staff left a sour taste. When Carson returned from vacation and heard the complaints, that was the end of Chase's Tonight Show career. He was never asked to guest host again, and despite his fame, he never returned as a guest. Ironically, Carson had once considered him a potential successor. That possibility vanished after a single week. Another example came from actor Charles Grodin, whose deadpan, confrontational style could be hilarious when handled well. In his first Tonight Show appearance in the early 1970s, however, he didn't warn anyone that he planned to play the role of an antagonistic guest. He challenged Carson directly, accusing him of not being prepared and questioning his professionalism. The audience wasn't sure if it was real or an act, and Carson was trapped, unable to fully play along because he hadn't been prepared, but unable to shut it down without looking thin-skinned. Afterward, Grodin was quietly iced out for several years. Only later, once both sides agreed on the rules of the bit, did he return. And eventually those mock argument appearances became fan favorites. But the first time left Carson furious. Finally, there was Hollywood royalty, Bette Davis. When she appeared in 1972, her list of demands was staggering. Special lighting, control over camera angles, no mention of certain topics, and even a request to appear as the only guest that night. Carson and his team accommodated where they could, but they drew the line at canceling other segments. Davis was furious, and once on air, she directed camera operators mid-interview and even told Carson to shift his chair because he was blocking the light. That crossed the line. After the show, Johnny made it clear she wouldn't be invited back. He respected her as an actress, but he would never hand over control of his program, not even to a Hollywood legend. These stories, scattered across decades of broadcasting, reveal the side of Johnny Carson viewers rarely saw. Behind the charming smile was a man who ran his show with precision and expected his guests to respect those boundaries. He gave people opportunities, launched countless careers, and kept America laughing for 30 years. But if you crossed him, whether through arrogance, disrespect, or chaos, you paid the price. Once you landed on Johnny Carson's mental blacklist, you didn't come back. And in the world of late-night television, that was a career sentence.